Welcome to Yeshiva Daf. We're holding in Zevachim Daf Ein. We're going to be starting at Daf Samechtes Amud Beis, towards the middle of the Amud. Even though we did it on Shabbos, but just to get into the Inyonim, we're going to see, we had in our Mishnah Machlekes. Machlekes was like this. When you have a bird that you break the neck with the nail, called Melika, the din is, even though that's not a regular shechito outside Beis HaMikdash, but inside of Beis HaMikdash, that's good enough, and it takes away the tumah of an nevelo that a bird has. The bird has a tumah nevelo. When you eat it, the begodim become tomeh abeis hablio. It becomes tomeh in the throat. So if there was a melika, it goes away. Now the discussion in the Mishnah is what happens if the bird is sick? It's a treifa. Does the melika work? We have here a three-way machlikas in the Mishnah. We're going to focus on right now is the first two shittas, which is Abiyud and Rameir. The reader says if the bird is treifa, it remains tummy. And Rameir says no, even if it's treifa, if you did melika, it's not tummy anymore. How do we know that? So that's what we're going to be starting right now to understand Rameir. To understand Abiyud. I apologize. So the Gemara says we're going to go in. It's about half. We're going to start a little early, and then we go to get into it. To Samachtes base around half of the page, where the word says the end of the line says Ver Rabbi Yehuda. So it says over there Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda my taimo. What's the reason of Rabbi Yehuda? Kra ashkach v'kadosh. The beginning of the line is my taimo. He found the pasuk nevelo treifa. It says the word nevelo and treifa regarding what? Regarding iftami. It says the Rambam view the treifa lamanebro. Im treifo chayo. If it says already treifo, what everybody say? We're going to have some Yechezkel base in the middle. So Gemara says in treifo chayo. So the pasuk mentions treifa and nevela. How do you treat the treifa? Is the treifa considered to be a live animal? Meaning the fact that it's treifa. Treifa means that it's sick. It's a live animal. So we have Yechezkel base in the middle. That's where we're going from. So he says, I read nevela umur. In other words, when it dies, it becomes a nevela, like any other nevela. What's different? The fact that it's treifa. In treifa ein chai. If you want to tell which is not life, already bichlal nevela is right away considered to be a nevela. And here comes a big chiddush from Rashi. And Rashi says that a animal who's a treifa, meaning it's sick, when it's alive, it should already become tummy. It's considered to be dead when it's alive. Okay? To tell you the treifo, when you shecht it, it's tum. That's the Gemara that we saw yesterday, Shabbos Daf, that's the link. So the Gemara basically says, according to Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yehuda is the one who says, if I take a bird and do miliko, if the bird is treifo, I mean it's sick, treifo doesn't help, and it stays tummy, and that's the pasuk, because the pasuk has the extra word treifo. What are you going to do with the extra word treifo? It says the Gemara now, according to this, you have a problem whenever it says treifo. What do you do with the word treifo? There's another pasuk. It says, don't eat the fat of nevela or treifo. Say over there as well. In treifo chayo. The same logic. If a treifo is considered to be a live animal, hare nevela amor. It says nevela, meaning, so what happened? If it's alive, it's still alive. If it died, it died. So, why treifa is mentioned over here? The fact that it's sick doesn't affect it at all. In treifa einecha, you want to tell me that treifa is a sick animal. It's considered to be dead already. Harei bichlal nevela. We already mentioned nevela. It's already nevela. Hello, what do you want to tell me? Lavi treifa shechachto shechel bator. This pasuk tells you that the fat is tar. Fat is tar. Meaning you had a treifo, sick animal, you shechted the animal, the fat is tar. So well, that can't be. Mechlal dihi metama, you want to tell me the animal itself is tummy? We learned not all behemoths are metamo. Treifa, you did a shechita on it, it's not metamo. So it's not only the fat, the entire animal is not metamo. Elo treifa mi bayale lemut tve. Elo ma, he will say the vimshat. Why you could do with the word treifa? Again, the Gemara is just questioning, because the beautiful logic is, the Torah doesn't tell me treifa if it says nevela. Treifa means a sick animal. Nevela means a dead animal. Why do you say treifa? So bring another pasuk that has the same question. What do you do with the word treifa? Maybe it's coming to tumeya, an animal which is not a kosher animal. Mishesh b'mina treifa yotzazu shein b'mina treifa by an animal, a kosher animal. Depends if it's you have treifas. We speak about treifas. By a not kosher animal, I don't have such a thing. So maybe okay by us as well. We're talking about the birds. Who said we're talking about a bird that is kosher? Maybe it's coming to include a bird which is tameh, which is not kosher. Or if tameh le'abidim in nevela nafkele. Now we learn from nevela. Could it be that a non-kosher animal will cause tumah? Only the one which is also because it's a nevela. But if not, then it would be a nevela, it would be kosher. It's anyway also because it's a automatic bird. So that can't be the pasuk of bird. There's one of einem without. Going back to the fat pasuk. You learn from nevela. Exclude the behema which is not kosher, because the fact it doesn't change when it becomes a carcass. Carcass, that's the word, carcass. Hello, mishum tomeh, right? And because of tomeh. So Gemara says again, what do you use with the word treifa? No, we're telling you is to come to the chayo. Also by chayo it's star when the fat of a chayo is star. How would you think otherwise? Something that usually the fat is also, and the meat is mutter. That's a behemo. We call it domestic animal or light animal. Not domestic animal. The chaylev of a chaya is always mutter. That's the din. So maybe it's not part of this pasuk. Kamash malan, that's the pasuk, right? To tell me that the chaylev is star. Why by tumeyo say that it's different? Because the fat is not different than the basar. It's also not different. So that's why it should not be part of this pasuk. Because this pasuk is talking about only something that the chaylev is different. We have a special pasuk that speak about that case. Treifa that we have by a chayo, by a chaylev, the gufa yitzich, for its own. We know that an animal which is non-kosher is not allowed to eat it. Since when can you eat it? Since its birth. You're allowed to eat a pig. No, it's not kosher. Treifa also you're not allowed to eat it when it becomes sick. When it's still alive, you can't eat it. So I would think that it will become that the fat will become tummy. That's why I need to have a special pasuk to tell you not to. Says the more Yachi. Let's go back to the bird. A tummy dikoif is also bachilo. Treifa asur bachilo. And a sick bird is also achilo. If tummy and a tummy mitame, this goes to have treifa and mitame. Maybe we'll say that. That's question number one. So how do you learn the first pasuk? Can you learn a sick animal from a tummy animal? Tmeyo was born that way. Treifa he was not born. Treifa was good. It became sick later. It's not doimil the tmeyo. And what about it? There's sometimes an animal is born sick. What will say then? I find treifa does have a type which is not always used to be puzzled. So you can't learn from Torah. So the Gemara goes back and forth. What does the Gemara conclude? Why does it say treifa by a fact? This is the chiddush. When an animal dies, you have a issur to eat its fat. What happens if the animal dies without shechita? Does it have also issur of nevela? Or if the animal is sick, so it has also the issur treifa? What's the problem having two issurim? We have a rule in Shas, in issur chalal issur. If you have one issur, another issur will not fall on it, will not join it. So he already has the Isser. What's the Isser? It's the Isser of Chaylev. So maybe I won't have Nevela and Treifa. That's the special pasuk. That Treifa and Nevela fall it. Toys already asked over here, without going now to make it too complicated, the concept of any Isser Chal Isser is only if the second Isser is equal to the first Isser. But if the second Isser is stronger than the first Isser, it's called Isser Moisif. So it will Chal. So why do I need a pasuk? That's a question of Toys over here. The one goes on and says, why do I need both? The Yeshvein Nevela Mishun Dimitami. Nevela costs Tumo. Of a Treifa Emeloi. Treifa doesn't go Tumo. So maybe not. Yeshvein Treifa Mishun Isser Mechaim. It starts when it's alive. Of a Emeloi Tzricha. Good. So all of this cheshbon that we said was all to come and say. Rabbi Yehuda tells us, when I have a bird which was sick, and I did milika, tuma remains. Because why it says the word treifa? So whoa, but it says treifa by chaylev. What do you do there? More now in the whole cheshbon back and forth, the Gemara concluded. I need to tell you treifa by an animal to tell you that's isur chal isur. What does the treifa by the bird tell you? It tells you that the tumor remains by a milika of a bird which is sick. Rameir disagrees. Rameir holds the milika, which is by a sick bird, works. What about the word treifa? Let's address right away. Rameir treifa ma'avile. What do you do with the word treifa? To tell you that if you shechted it inside, then it's tummy. Because inside you have to do miliko. If you did shchita, the tumor remains. If you do treifa chlinik, it says treifa second, there's two psukim about treifa. The second one teaches about that. One is going to tell you that shchita inside is something that doesn't work. And the other one to tell you that a bird which is tameh, milika, doesn't take out tumah. That's what we said before. The Buddha learns from the word nevela. We said before. It says nevela only something that it changes when it's alive or when it's dead. Which is always tameh. Non-kosher bird. An eagle. What Rameir will do with the concept of what he's going to do with the word nevela? It tells you, we know what's the Isser. It's when you eat a kazais. Like any other Yisur in Shabbat Torah. That's what it says in nevela. Tell you the shear. What do I learn already? Because it says nevela in the first pasuk of two psukim. Why the first pasuk? It says don't eat. Eat is always kazais. So I'll tell you why. You need to learn two things. First of all, what amount do you eat is a problem? Kazais. That cause. Second, how long do I have to eat it? That's usually the amount it takes to eat a half a bread, which is one meal. How do I know that applies over here, which is different? Because I know that a bird doesn't cause regular tumor, only when you eat it. I need two psukim for that. It's a chiddush. Maybe you need more than chizpas. So that's what Rameir learns. So what about Rabbi Yehuda? Says Rabbi Yehuda learns everything from the same pasuk. Okay, he says you don't need two psukim for that. So that was the cheshbon back and forth, Rameir and Rabbi Yehuda. Continues now the Gemara in Daf Ayin Amud Aleph towards the bottom. It says that going back to the pasuk we mentioned before we go in the fact. Talk about a kosher animal that the fat is not going to cause tumor. Maybe talk about a non-kosher animal. We have a taharo when you shecht, and you have a taharo by a fat. Pasuk told you that a fat of an animal is okay. When you do shchito, does shchito work in a non-kosher animal? No. Doesn't help. So, only a kosher animal shchita works. So also when we talk about chaylev that you say doesn't cause tumah, is only by a kosher animal, not by a non-kosher animal. Or maybe we'll say differently. We find taharo by a nevela, and we find taharo by a chaylev. What does it mean? Meaning, in other words, when you have the concept of a nevela means a dead animal, carcass, is only by a behemoth toyu. Behemoth toyu that dies causes tumas nevela. Behemoth tmea that dies doesn't. That's what the Gemara understands in the beginning. The Gemara is going to ask right away, what are you talking about? You want to tell me when you have a dead pig, it doesn't cost tuma? So the Gemara is going to answer, no, I'll tell you what we're talking about. We're talking about a bird. A bird. That's what Gemara is going to say in a moment. Let's get to the Gemara in a moment. Right now, the sentence of the Gemara is, the only concept of tuma by a dead animal is only tar animal, not a atomic one. It says the Gemara, only a non-kosher animal doesn't have tuma. Also, maybe we'll say that fat that doesn't go tuma is only by tmei not b'toiro. It says the Gemara daf ayin with base. I have two ways to learn the pasuk. I can talk about a kosher animal, talk about a non-kosher animal. Talmud loimar treifo. It says the word treifo. Mishyesh b'mino treifo. The extra word in the pasuk is treifo. Treifo means a sick animal. Who has a difference when it's sick or not sick? Kosher animal. If it's sick, you're not letting treifo. If it's not sick, you're not eat it. By a behemoth, it doesn't matter if it's sick or not sick, you never can eat it. That's what we're talking about. So that's what we're talking about. I remove the tmeyo, it doesn't have the idea of treifo. Go back, just we're adding now. What about a non-domestic animal? Also, sheyesh b'mina treifo does have treifo. So maybe I'll say that but you include over here a chayo. Tomud loimar v'achoylu techlu. Same pasuk says, you're allowed to enjoy, there's no tumor, there's no problem with the chaylev, with the fat of the animal. But don't eat it. Don't eat it. Don't eat the fat, but you can eat the meat. So you differentiate between the fat and the meat. So you come and say that a chayo, that there we don't have a difference between the fat and the meat. The difference between fat and meat is only by a domestic animal, by a behemoth, not by a chayo. So you may so Bimela says, I don't learn from your Chai. Chai is not included in this pasuk. Okay, that's what he's saying. So the idea that we have the chalif, the concept, we're saying this pasuk is talking about a behemoth. That the chalif is a costumo, not by a Chai. We're not talking about a Chai over here. Chai we didn't discuss. Because then you would say maybe you have a problem by a chalif. Sometimes if you didn't. This is not talking about the pasuk. Why? Because we're talking about only an animal, behemoth, whichever difference between the fat and the meat. So that's what we dash in the pasuk. We're not talking about behemoth tmeyo, talking about behemoth toyo, not talking about chayo, talking about behemoth. Says the Gemara, how do we go back to the sentence? There was a sentence that was said, it was very strange. We said that a carcass, a dead animal, was only caused tuma by toyo, not by tmeyo. Says the Gemara, only a dead animal which is kosher causes tumor. He was behemoth. Is that true? Interesting sentence you have over here. How much old people like you got made a mistake? In other words, you shouldn't make a mistake over. You should have understand what the brisa means. Seifa, what it says over there, that there's no tumor by a dead animal, I'm needless oif tameh. I'm talking about an animal, I'm talking about a bird. Bird that dies, what does it cost? Tumah, only tumah. Which tumah does the birds cost? Only tumas, besabliya, only when you swallow it. But by a non-kosher animal, you don't have it. We don't have by a non-kosher animal the tumas basically. Tumas basically is a chiddush and it's only by a kosher animal. It continues going and says like this. Now let's go back to the Mishnah. What does the Mishnah say? The Meir holds the miliko. If you didn't milika by oif, there's no tumah. Even if the oif is a treifa, even if it's sick. That's what Meir says. It says the Gemara, that's only if the bird is not missing a limb. By a bird it means missing a limb, loy. It needs to be kosher like has to have everything else intact. And even if it's a balmum, always Malika works. It also works.
But only if it's on the inside.
What?
Only if it's on the base meat, right?
Yeah, even though it's sick, even though it's treif, it does still work. Says the Gemara, Eat Ranami, bring your right. Omar Bibi Omar Vlozo Mitaya Ramir Bebalimumin. Meir allows even a balimumin. Ve'afilu, and listen to this chiddush, ve'avozim v'tarnegoylim. Even geese and chicken. Geese and chicken you can't bring to Beis Hamikdash. But if you did melika in geese and chicken, it works. So here the first we're discussing, what do you mean? How can it be geese and chicken will be kaddish? They're not supposed to be a carbon. The Rashi says that we learn the fact we have melika by a oif, we learn. That's what we learn from it. The Shinu Kubetz is here. He says it's considered to be kachim, and so Rashi learns talking about kachim. Rashi says if you look at Loshen Rashi afilu avozim says the lab name is be'achem ubevad shiyu kachim bifnim. It has to be kaddish. Says the Shinu Kubetz, how can you have kaddish by chicken and geese? It will be only kachim v'tikabayis. It won't be kachim mizbeach. So says the Shinu Kubetz, we're talking about even on chuli. Rabbi holds that milika always takes away tumah, even by chulin. So now let's go to something similar. Oraf eiz mal. What happens if someone in Shabbos asked, was like, can you do a rifo, which is cutting with a nail, a cow? So someone said, well, if you cut the cow with a nail, you'll break your thumb, then breaking the nail. So here we're talking about an actual case that could happen. What about doing a rifo to a goat? A goat is a very small animal. Now we're talking about a rifo. We're talking about going back to kachim. It seems like Rashi a little bit more, because we have a concept called egla rufo. It's egla rufo. You have to come and we talk about egla rufo is you chop the head out, but it needs to be an egla. It needs to be a calf. What happens if he chopped the head of a goat? He brought that as egla rufo. Doesn't work. It needs to be egla rufo. Does it take away the tumor of nevela? So what about Arifas Ace? Why do we say that geese and chicken work? Because they're also birds. Maybe goat is not the same min as a calf. Or maybe it needs to be a behemo. A goat, and it can't be a chay. It needs to be a behemo. Meaning, so that's a behema gas, a behema dako. Meaning, do we say that they're both behemoths, or the different behemoths? What is a behema gas and behema dako? Because behema gas and behema dako is more like a bigger animal and or a more wild animal. The goat compared to the calf, the goat is going to be a little more gas. So it's called. So maybe it's the opposite. It could be a behema dako. Behema dako are the smaller animals, like a sheep, like a goat. It's called behema dako. A bull, a calf is called behema gaso. So maybe it's not considered to be the same min. Says the Gemara, Yosef Dimi Yukomer Lilashmite. So before we get to that, so what do you see here? Here the Gemara wants as a suffix, and this we see there's things you learn from here that by a bird all birds are equal. They're all considered to be oif. Chicken and a pigeon are considered to be the same kind. They're all oif. But when we're talking about a behemo, there may be a difference between behema dak and behema gaso. That's what you see from the Gemara over here. So Avdimi said this whole shmur that we just learned about egla rufo. I'm going to tell me the egla rufo when you shecht it has tahara, because you're saying what happens if instead of using a calf I use the goat, but it's a tahara. Says yes. How do we know that? Because it says kapora ksibo kekoch. It says by egla rufo kapora. You have kapora over there. When kapora means that you shechted in this animal's kosher. Meaning it's a good shechita. So Rav Nasson, who's the father of Rav Huna, who's the son of Rav Nasson. This is something that repeat itself because it became his name. Rav Nasson. It says It says don't eat. That's the pasuk we said before. So maybe chaylev you're not allowed to eat, but you're allowed to enjoy it. Chaylev shel shor haniskol. Shor haniskol is a bull who gored. What happens to shor haniskol? You're not allowed to enjoy it. If to kill, right? It's going to be killed. You're not allowed to enjoy it. Chaylev shor haniskol, you're not allowed to eat. Ve'egla rufa, you're not allowed to eat. Minayin that the chaylev is you're allowed to enjoy it. Tomuloyma kol chaylev, every chaylev. He's saying that egla rufa toyer, even though egla rufa doesn't have two more. He toyer v'chel b'tom. Why should I think that the fat would be different? The whole animal doesn't cause tumor. So of course the fat, the policy tells you should know that the fat is not metame. Even egla rufa. Of course egla rufa's fat isn't metame. Because egla rufa's fat, the whole behemoth is not metame. You just said the whole thing is not metame. Says more when you chop the head off and you did it correctly, you're right, and for sure there's no tumor. Came a person that did a mistake. Instead of doing egla rufa, he took the calf, which is designated egla rufa, and he did what? Shchita. He just did a regular shchita. Like by Shor Nisko. Instead of stoning it, he just shecht it. Shaila is then what? Then it's not, you're not allowed to eat it. That's also ba'ana. But the chaylev doesn't cost too. The chaylev is mutar ba'ana. So the more v'tiani le'shchito le'tarim in the nevela. So why not? Why shchita doesn't take away the concept of nevela? Right? The shchita should take it out, even though it's also ba'ana. Right? Rashi said, the Rashi Ksaviyat says, we have two Rashis now. Sorry for yesterday's daf, we have two Rashis. Rashi and Rashi Ksaviyat. Rashi Ksaviyat says that we never found the Be'im HaTorah Shchuta Shematam. So you did Shchita, the tumor should go away anyway. So more, you're right. We're talking about the Egla Rufa died, a natural death. Shaila is, so then it does cost tumor. The answer is, even though it costs tumor, the chaylev, the fat doesn't. So more, Michlai, the Mechayim Asur. Mashma, the when it's alive, it's also right. Mashma, it's also because you're telling me, I have to tell you a chiddush that once it dies, the chaylev is mutar ba'ano. Mashma before it died is also ba'ano, right? So only when it died is mutar ba'ano. Before it's also. When did it become also ba'ano? The Gemara thought maybe you know when it's also ba'ano. It's also ba'ano only once you chop its head. Before you chop it head, when did it become also ba'ano? It's not kodesh. Says the Gemara in. I heard there's a certain period when it becomes also ba'ano. And the friends in the Bris Hamikdash said, "Yiridoso lenachal eson hi or sarta." When it goes down to the nachal, right? They're taken down to the nachal, which is like the place of the river, dry river. That's where with the bank, that's when it goes down to there, it becomes also. So usually an animal becomes kodesh, or magdish, it becomes also. Shor Nisko, once it bores, it becomes also. Once in basin, same, you take it to basin. Here, it becomes also where? It becomes also when it is, you just nachal. Once it goes down to nachal, you bring it down to the river, so then it becomes also. Now let's enjoy it. Also, but if it died, the chaylev, the fat is mutar ba'ano. That's what you learn from this pasuk. Let's say they have like one last thing with this, we'll conclude. We have over here, interesting point, we have a vozim v'tanagoylim. You have geese and chicken. The geese and chicken may, maybe a refund, maybe there's kedusha over here. There's an interesting, however, that goes back to yesterday's daf. The Gemara there says that in Bama, when before there was Beis Hamikdash, at Bama, Kashayel is, can you bring birds there or not? There's a machlekes. More machlekes we'll see later in the Masechta, or birds kosher b'bama. So Reuben Magalius points out, it says by Noach, that how many animals and birds to Hayrim did he bring? 7 of each. Why? Because to bring them korbanos. So visual animals, all the animals to Hayrim can be korbanos. What about the birds? The birds can be only pigeon and doves. So he says from here, you see that the Noach, can bring all the birds to Beis Hamikdash. You can bring chicken, you can bring, any kosher bird was able to be kosher over there. Just imagine, we learned on Friday, Maseches Kinim, we did the cheshbon, you have a mistake between 2 birds. Imagine you have a mistake between 50 birds. That'll be, the Mishnah will be much longer. So this is really, Reuben Magalius wants to say that this thing does exist. Say the Gomer, we'll stop over here. We finished, Baruch Hashem, the 7th parak, Zevachim. Tomorrow morning we're starting the 8th parak.